Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've said it in the past and I'll say it again. A healthy and functioning state, good governance, depends on three things. The people must be educated, knowledgeable, and diligent. If we are talking of democracy as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, then the people must be educated. They must understand the issues at stake. And they must be diligent in holding those in positions of power and authority to account. Otherwise, power will shift from the people to those political leaders. The political leaders should be no more than a tail to a dog. But when the politician is able to manipulate, con at will the people, then we've got a crazy situation where the tail is wagging the dog. We in Zimbabwe, we have failed to have a functioning, credible government because the politicians have been able to do whatever they like. The people have shown again and again that they're incapable of holding the political leaders to account. Some of the things are so obvious that it really beggars belief why people are failing to see it. Let's take the issue of Zanu PF promising economic prosperity, mass prosperity, kutsarushinji as Mugabe used to call it. And now Mnangagwa has come up with his own term, Vision 2030, where Zimbabwe is supposed to be an upper middle income nation by 2030. The politicians have been able to lie to the people, making them those empty promises, because the people themselves have never been able to hold them to account. Chamisa, the opposition, has done the same thing. MDC was elected in the late 1990s for the primary purpose of implementing democratic changes in Zimbabwe to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That is part of what I mean by the people must be educated and knowledgeable. If you don't know that MDC was elected to implement reforms, even now with the benefit of hindsight, then seriously, you shouldn't be voting. What are you voting for? And yet, we have seen people going to elections, voting these politicians year in, year out. Every Zimbabwean with a bit of gray stuff between their ears must hold their heads in shame that 44 years after independence, we are still failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. That's shocking, absolutely shocking, in this day and age. And yet it is true. I've got a video clip here of Chamisa making his usual promises. Let's just listen to it, just a clip of it.
Unozakana unebhonzo, imbwa inebhonzo haihukuri. Inenge yakazama yakabata bhonzo renyika. Tinozviziva kuti pakaita sei, nyika inoyi ichagara zvakanaka. Tozadzikisa chinangwa changa china vazvizvayo. Chokudai nyika yedu yagara zvakadi? Chikuru chiripo munyika muno toda runyararo. Chikuru chirimo munyika muno toda kubatana. Chikuru chirimo munyika muno toda kugadzira dambudziko riri muno. Tarisai muone matambudziko ariko kwese. South Africa tiri dambudziko, Botswana tiri dambudziko, Mozambique tiri dambudziko, Europe tiri dambudziko. Toda kuti vana veZimbabwe vadzoke muno, vavakire nyika yavo muno, vadye ifa remunyika muno. Zvinhu zvedu zvifambe zvakadii?
Christians, did you know there's a biblical?
Well, I'll stop it there. It is a pity that we seem to be going back and forth over the same issue. He is promising to deliver change so that Zimbabweans can go back to Zimbabwe. Yes, Zimbabweans have been scattered all over the globe in all directions in the last 20 years particularly. And it would be good for them to go back. The question is, why is it taking so long to deliver that change? MDC, CCC were elected on the understanding that they would deliver the democratic change. Why has it taken so long to deliver those changes? That question we cannot hide from it. We cannot pretend it's not there. It is there. The promises that change is round the corner by Chamisa is becoming annoying because it has been repeated so many times and never fulfilled. We cannot keep on talking of change and yet nothing happens. The people of Zimbabwe have risked lives, livelihoods, limbs, and over 500 were murdered in cold blood in the 2008 runoff alone. To elect MDC leaders into power on the understanding they would implement the necessary democratic changes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That should be at the heart of it. Last year, Zanu PF blatantly rigged the 2023 elections. Blatantly. A clear indication that no meaningful reforms have been implemented. And yet, in last year alone, just focusing on last year, Chamisa promised the people that CCC would win big. He has plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. Hashtag God is in it. Why didn't he deliver that promise? He has not explained, there's no bother to explain what happened. If he had plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes, what happened? I would not want even to invoke this hashtag God is in it. He was evoking the name of God in something that he knew was a lie. I think we as a people, we need to be knowledgeable enough not to be so easily conned again and again and again. When it comes to democratic reforms, yes, I agree that many people maybe did not understand what the democratic reforms were all about in the late 1990s when they were all chanting Chinja, Chinja. But after 24 years, I think there is no excuse for not knowing what these changes were. So why is it that he can still promise that change is around the corner and people believe him so readily? This is actually a very well-beaten path. Mnangagwa, ever since he took over, since the 2017 military coup, he has been cocksure that he was going to turn Zimbabwe's economic fortunes around. So cocksure that after the military coup, by January, hardly 2 months, he was talking of Zimbabwe is open for business. He went to Switzerland to sell that idea to the world. The truth is, none of the investors he was so sure would come flooding in turned up. Investors are a shrewd lot. They knew that the military coup of November 2017 did not change anything at all in Zimbabwe. It was just musical chairs. Mnangagwa and friends removed one dictator, Mugabe, and a few guys around him, and he took over. And Zimbabwe continued being a pariah state, ruled by corrupt, incompetent, and ruthless thugs. He promised that he would hold free, fair, and credible elections after the coup. 8 months later, when he had the opportunity to show, he blatantly rigged the 2018 elections. If there was any investor who was holding their breath, that was the time to breathe out, right? So this is the same pariah state, only it's now a different dictator. When he realized he could not attract the investors, he changed his tune. Now he was saying he will get Zimbabweans themselves to develop the country. And he still maintained that he was on target to deliver Vision 2030. Meanwhile, we can all see that Zimbabwe's infrastructure has been in decline ever since 1980. And that decline has continued. If anything, in fact, it has accelerated under this so-called Second Republic. Corruption is becoming rampant. Last year, we all watched this Al Jazeera documentary on gold smuggling. and no one was arrested. And the few people who the Anti-Corruption Commission arrests, more often than not, is catch and release. So corruption has been rampant. And yet he maintains he's going to deliver Vision 2030. And there are thousands, if not millions, of Zimbabweans out there who still believe that nonsense. And the same applies to Chamisa. He's telling us change is around the corner. At the present moment, I don't see any change that he can bring. His party, Triple C, participated in last year's elections against all advice that they should not participate in such a flawed elections. Participating will only give Zanu PF legitimacy, and yet they stubbornly maintained their position and participated. And that gave Zanu PF legitimacy. The question then comes, why is it that Zimbabweans are so gullible and naive that they are easily conned into believing the same lie in some cases over and over and over again? For 44 years, Zanu PF, the people of Zimbabwe have been waiting for free, fair, and credible elections. And Zanu PF has yet to deliver that. Zanu PF has promised economic prosperity, and yet, right now, over half of the population are living in abject poverty. Here is a country that has got incredible resources, that has got the potential to become the South Korea of Africa. Instead of these resources being the ones that will propel the country into rapid development and economic prosperity, they have now become a curse, because Zanu PF has used the wealth, the looted wealth, to bankroll its vote-rigging machinery. Defeating Zanu PF now with its economic muscle is becoming really, really difficult. We saw last year how much Mnangagwa spent in bribery various key people, from the villager with motorcycles. All the chiefs were given twin cab trucks. And it went right up the scale to MPs. Outgoing MPs were given $40,000 housing loan. Just called a loan, but everybody knew it was a bribe. They were not going to repay $40,000, when some of them knew they were not going to be re-elected at the end of their term in parliament. He bribed the MPs, the senators, because he wanted them to say nothing about what he was about to do. He even bribed his deputy ministers, $230,000 housing loan. Ministers, $500,000 housing loan. And with them taken care of, he was now free to go after all the key players in the electoral process. notably the judges, the directors in the CIO, the police, the army, and so forth. Judges got a cool 400,000 US dollars housing loan. I've never heard of one judge who refused it. And they were all smart enough to know that this is a loan. This is not a loan. This is a bribe. And come the elections, they delivered their half of the bargain. There's no judge who could pretend that they did not know that ZEC had failed to produce a verified voters roll, for instance. A key requirement in the electoral act. And yet they were to preside over the nomination process. None of them would raise the issue that is this a verified voters roll, because they knew that it was not. But they pretended that it was. When you've just received a 400,000 housing loan and you have received it, it's payback time. The truth of the matter is, Zimbabwe is a failed state. And there are many reasons why it is a failed state. And one of them has to be that the Zimbabwean electorate are such a naive and gullible people. They believe anything they are told. And they will be conned again and again and again. It is often said that nations get the government they deserve. There's no doubt that Zimbabweans deserve this corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF dictatorship. Just completely destroyed the economy. We deserve that too. This corrupt, incompetent dictatorship, complete with its equally corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless MDC-CCC opposition. Why would it take a diligent electorate more than 24 years to realize that MDC guys are never going to deliver on the democratic change? They're never going to deliver even one token reform to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And yet that is the case. Chamisa can confidently promise the people change is around the corner when he knows that he is no position to implement even one token reform. But he also knows that the people are very naive and gullible, and they will believe it. South Africa, next door, has just held free, fair, and credible elections. The country has had a history of holding free, fair, and credible elections this last 30 years. I think this year, after 30 years of gross mismanagement and corruption by the ANC government, the people have finally realized that they need to hold ANC to account. To pretend somehow because ANC was the vanguard party fighting apartheid will guarantee that ANC leaders will not be corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless and tyrannical in some cases too, in fact, was naive. But for South Africans, they were lucky because they're able to get out of it. They were able to vote ANC out. And I think an ANC government with a lot of its wing feathers plucked out will be a better government for the people of South Africa. And I must say, for the region too, and Zimbabwe in particular. There is no doubt that the last 20 years particularly, ANC has been the bedrock of supporting and propping up Zanu PF dictatorship. November 2022, ANC made a party resolution that they would not allow regime change in Zimbabwe. It was a clear message to Zanu PF that they can go ahead and rig the elections. ANC will support them. And they did rig the 2023 elections. And ANC, true to its word, came to Zanu PF's aid. The damning SADC report, the damning AU report should have sent the Zanu PF back to the sin bin, as happened in 2008. It didn't happen because Cyril Ramaphosa and his ANC friends came with a high-powered delegation to Mnangagwa's inauguration to show their support and solidarity with the regime. Only two other African heads of state turned up for that inauguration. But now, with South Africa's ANC's wings clipped, I don't think ANC will dare be that foolish to boldly support a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical regime. Our chance in Zimbabwe of finally having reforms so that we have free, fair, and credible elections is very good if we are willing to seize the opportunity and make it work for ourselves. That's my message. It's a pity, I repeat, that Zimbabweans are so gullible. They will believe anything they are told. And to believe that Chamisa is going to deliver change is naive, to say the very least. 24 years he has failed to deliver even one token reform. Why anyone would still believe that Chamisa would deliver beggars belief. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next time. Good night.